would like to thank Silk Road Group. It's due to them and to their hospitality that we are here in such a beautiful place, attending this discussion and also enjoy good weather in such a beautiful environment. Today's discussion and the topic of our discussion is architecture, urban development, urban renovations and transformation of social urban ways, and Georgia is undergoing this process, and therefore it will be of paramount importance for us to listen to our guests because they are aware of the problem. They have been staying in Georgia for 2 or 3 days though, but still I believe that they have seen something already, although I'm not sure whether how much, and I would like to remind you that the discussion is within the frames of Europe Weekdays in Tbilisi. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thanks very much for everyone coming on this beautiful sunny day to sit inside and talk about urban planning. It's really appreciated that you've all come. I'm looking forward to having a really interesting discussion today, looking at Georgia, looking at the wider region, and really looking at issues that are relevant across the world. The two people that we've got on the panel with me, we've got Edouard Moreau. He's the lead urban designer at DAR Group, which is a huge multidisciplinary consultancy. They've got 40 offices around the world, and Edward's worked on projects across the world, in the Middle East, Africa, Europe, places as diverse as Tirana, Lagos, Moscow, and Lebanon. He's also the co-founder of Technopolitan Studio, which is a research and design studio in London, which looks at contemporary urban issues based on emerging new technologies. And then directly to my right here, we have Eugene Asse, who, if I were to read out all of his achievements, we might be here for a few hours, so I'll just give you a few select ones. He graduated from the Moscow Institute of Architecture in 1970 and worked as an architect in the Moscow Municipal Planning Office. He did a postgraduate course in urban design and then headed the Urban Design Research Group at the State Institute of Design until 1986. And he's an architect, an artist, and an exhibition designer. He has got his own design office, Asse Architects, which is based in Moscow and which he runs until this day. He's got an extraordinarily diverse range of interests. He's also an architectural critic. He writes and lectures on urban design and theory of architecture. And he's represented Russia at the Venice Art Biennale in 1995, and he was also the commissioner of the Russian Pavilion at the Architecture Biennale in both 2004 and 2006. So what I'd like to do is I'm just going to say a very few words, and then we're going to just kick off with a little discussion among the three of us, and then very quickly I'd very much like to open the discussion to whoever would like to take part. And I think, given that we are having this discussion in Georgia, it's particularly interesting to look at the context of urban planning, of cities, of the way people live in urban environments in the post-Soviet region. And I know that Georgia very much looks at itself as a future European country rather than a former Soviet country. But of course, over the past 2 decades, even though there are huge differences between Minsk, Dushanbe, Tbilisi, these are places that they all had to make transitions from one type of political system to another type, different between them. And of course, they're also places that over the last 2 decades, they've been building national identities, in some cases creating them, in some cases resurrecting them, in other cases reinforcing ones that existed decades previously. And of course, a large part of nation building, of ideologies of statehood, are the buildings and the architecture and the way that the cities look. So, in Minsk we have a city that hasn't changed much from the way it looks in the last 20 years. In Astana, the capital of Kazakhstan, we have this strange city emerging from the steppe of ultra-modern, sort of slightly odd buildings. We've got Tbilisi, where there's been new construction and renovations, which of course have come with some controversy. And last week I was in Baku for the first time in several years, and I couldn't recognize the place. We have this extraordinary Zaha Hadid building as you come in from the airport. We've got a renovated old town, we've got pedestrianised squares that are very nice, and then we've got these 3 giant skyscrapers called the Flame Towers, which overlook the entire city and sort of dwarf your view from everywhere. So I found that kind of a strange mix of surprisingly pleasant and very disturbing. So I think there's a lot to talk about, and because I think not everyone here is oh, and I should just say about myself, I'm Moscow Correspondent, The Independent, a former contributing editor of Monocle magazine, and this is a subject that I'm very interested in, although by no means as distinguished an expert as the people sitting by me. So I think because we may not have a room full of specialists here, it would be good if we could start off with Edward, who will maybe just say a few words about what exactly we mean when we talk about urban planning, urban design, and what his work involves in that sphere.
Well, first, thank you for the invitation. It's great to be in front of you today. Maybe I would first like to introduce the topic of urban planning and urban design. It's not that well known compared to architecture. Oh, sorry, better? Yeah, I was saying that urban planning and urban design is probably not as well known as architecture. The traditional definition of urban design is the art of place making, which is a bit of a grand definition. I would say it's simply an approach to cities, looking at cities not as a sum of individual buildings, but as an entity, as a living entity, really. So it's not only buildings and spaces in between them. To quote Jan Gehl, which is a very famous urban designer, urban planner, is saying that there's life between buildings. It's a very interesting book, by the way. And so looking at cities not as a sum of individual buildings, but as a living entity, a complex entity, I would say. Well, I'm teaching at diverse architecture schools, and usually architects are quite afraid of tackling the urban issues because it's very complex. As soon as you look at the territory, you look at not only physical bricks and mortar, you look at cultural aspects, social aspects, human aspects, political aspects, technical aspects. A lot of it's a very complex kind of interconnected layering of dimensions to take into account. Saying this is actually a very great job to be an urban designer. Really recommend this because it's fascinating.